All right, hello everyone. We are going to get started in about 2 minutes, just to give everyone a few minutes to join. So please hang with us and we'll start soon.
Hey Ken, could you do me a favor and pull some GA4 numbers for me quickly?
Yeah, sure. What do you need?
Can you tell me the ratio of new to established users who visited the Google Merchandise Store in the last 28 days?
Yeah, happy to. I think we got enough time. Let's see here. I'm just going to flip over to GA and I'm going to create an exploration for that. Let's see. There's a dimension here called new. There it is. New or established. We got metrics. Let's just do total users. And let's see. Uh-oh. That's weird. What does not set mean? What do you guys think?
I don't think this is going to work. Why don't you try BigQuery?
Ah, great idea. You know what? I happen to have a query for this right here. Let's take a look. Let's see. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a look at the GA session number. And if it's 1, it means it's your first session. So I'll call you a new user and otherwise established. Let's see what that says. Pretty quick to run. Oh, there we go. That solved that problem, don't you think?
You know, the numbers look really good, but I actually need a way to create visualizations that I can share with my stakeholders. Maybe something a little bit more interesting than a table of data.
Yeah, great point. Coincidentally, I've got this Looker Studio dashboard right here. It's a free tool from Google. You can actually run a query right from it on BigQuery. So this is running the same query. You think that might work for your stakeholders?
You know, I don't know. We actually stopped using Looker Studio because of issues with tokens and API limits.
Well, that's not a problem. If your report reads data from BigQuery, there are no tokens, no sampling, and no API limits.
Wow, and there's no data retention policy that for some reason deletes my data after 14 months. So BigQuery lets me keep more of my historical data. Ken, I'm starting to think that everyone should probably run their Google Analytics reports from BigQuery and not from the UI.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great segue. Why don't we go ahead and get started with our webinar today, which, as Brian so eloquently put it, is why you should run Google Analytics reports from BigQuery instead of the user interface. So as you may have noticed, there are 3 of us who are here today. My name is Ken Williams. I am the founder of Dive Team. I'm principal consultant. And Dive Team, I'll talk about in a second, is all about helping marketers use their data to make decisions. Johan, you want to give your quick intro?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Johan van der Werken from the Netherlands. I'm a freelance data analyst, also analytics engineer, and also the founder of ga4bigquery.com.
And Brian.
Yeah, I'm Brian Martin. I'm a consulting data engineer and analyst, and I'm based out of beautiful Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I spend most of my time doing what we're talking about today, building data warehouses with cool tools in Google Cloud.
Yeah. So this is kind of what we specialize in, is helping marketing teams specifically design strategies, collect data, integrate that data, and analyze it. And today we want to talk about what's going on with BigQuery and why it's so important, and why specifically it might be more important now than it was a couple of years ago when we were on the last version of Google Analytics, which is called Universal Analytics. And the key is that Universal Analytics was pretty expensive for Google, especially considering that most of the users were on a free tool and not paying for GA360. So when Google Analytics 4 was being designed and rolled out, one of the things that we all began to feel was some measures that Google put in place to keep their costs under control. I've created a list here of 5 of those, and there are probably a few others. But if you use the last version of Google Analytics, you will remember what views are. Views no longer exist. And what views did is they let you slice your data so that certain individuals could only see some of it, or maybe you have different teams in your company and each team just wanted to see the data that was relevant to them. That was an expensive way to query data, and so those have been removed. There are now also pre-aggregated tables, and Universal Analytics had some of these as well, but they're more prevalent in GA4. And what these do is they let your reports run quickly, especially those reports that you get out of the box in GA4, but they're limited. That's why sometimes you might go to create a visual in your standard reports. Maybe you're creating a new topic so that it'll show up for everyone, or maybe you're just adding a secondary dimension, and something that you expect to see is not available. So it can be a little limiting and frustrating, but that keeps Google's costs down. There's also data retention limits. So for people on the free version, they can only keep 14 months of data, and it defaults, I think, when you create a new property to 2 months. So, you know, for privacy purposes, that is a good thing, but it also is another reason why some people get frustrated with GA4, because those didn't exist before. If you are trying to create an exploration or do some type of analysis, and your analysis is at the user scope, meaning you want to look for how many users are in an audience, or you look at some user scoped metric and dimension, maybe it's something custom, or maybe it's that new versus established dimension we created. You can only actually pull 93 days of data. So if you're creating an exploration and you want to look year over year, can't do that. It's an expensive query. And then the new thing, API token limits. So when the new reporting API was released, it had these limits. If you're running queries a lot in a BI tool like Looker Studio, you'll get cut off at some point because someone's got to pay for all that data processing. And so Google put caps on it. There are 2 other cost controls that you're probably aware of: sampling and an algorithm called hyperloglog. Those already existed in Universal Analytics. They continue to exist in GA4, and they can make working in the user interface frustrating and limited and sometimes surprising, because you know that in the past you created some reports and you can't do them anymore. So this is why we want to talk about BigQuery. If you've never seen BigQuery before, it's worth knowing 4 things about it. BigQuery is a product inside the Google Cloud Platform. It allows you to store your data and run analysis on that data for super low cost. At Dive Team, we have some clients who don't even exceed the free tier, so they don't pay anything to use this. And our biggest client, who uses it very heavily and has a lot of data, pays less than $200 a month. So certainly your price could go up if you have a lot of data and a lot of analysis, but it's very inexpensive. And the reason is because BigQuery is designed for lots of data and massive analysis. So you can run super fast queries against huge data sets, and it's fully managed by Google. So you don't have to think about servers and how many servers you need to spin up to run a big query. All you do is pull up the user interface, run a query, or in many cases, pull up Looker Studio and run a report, because it integrates with everything. If you're using Tableau, if you're using Power BI, whatever it is, any BI tool can read data from BigQuery. You can also use BigQuery as a way to shift data between clouds. You can import data directly from Google Ads and Facebook and Salesforce. So everything works really nicely with BigQuery. Now, as a result, you've got all of this power. But when you integrate Google Analytics with BigQuery, a couple of things happen behind the scenes. The most important thing to understand about it is the data that's being collected on your websites and native applications it still goes straight to Google Analytics, just like it always did. But a new channel is open where Google Analytics starts sending your data into BigQuery. And that works in two ways. There are tables that are running intraday. So if you want to see the current day's data and create some real-time reports, you can do that. That's an option that you don't have to flip on if you're not going to use it. There's another more common option that what most people use is a daily flow. And the way it works is every day at the end of the day, Google Analytics will prepare your data and then send it into a BigQuery table. And that table will have a date on it. So this is all of the data that you collected on August 20th, 2024 in a new table in BigQuery. So once that data is there, it is useful for anything that you want to do. A couple of notes about this. You can set your data to expire, but you don't have to in BigQuery. So you can keep your data longer than 14 months if that makes sense for your business. You can also, though, do things that you cannot do with your data in Google's user interface because it's at the event level. So the table that you have in BigQuery is a row. You imagine a massive table, a row for every event. So a page loaded, someone scrolled down a page, maybe they downloaded a document, and there's an identifier for the user. That identifier you can't get in the user interface, and it allows you to do all kinds of things, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And you've got unlimited flexibility because your only limitation is the power or the limitation of SQL. So since I mentioned SQL, I should mention there are some challenges working with data in BigQuery. And the main one is that you need to be a little bit familiar with SQL. If you're going to run reports out of BigQuery, you can just leave the data alone and plug something like Looker Studio into the raw data, but you'll pretty quickly run into scenarios where it's not going to work for what you're trying to do. The data is not exactly prepared to be used that way, so you'll want to get in and write some SQL to make sure you can answer the business questions you're trying to answer. There is a cost to BigQuery usually. So again, I mentioned it's very low. Many of our clients are on the free tier, under the free tier. But because there is a cost, Google isn't worried about putting any cost controls in place. If you happen to run massive queries over lots of days, then you'll get a bill for those. And so there's no limits on it. You can do it all you want. Now you can choose to limit yourself. You might say, I want to make sure I don't accidentally spend too much money. And there are lots of tools to help you do that. But Google's not going to prevent you from running any queries. And the last thing is that some of your data is not included in the export to BigQuery. If you're using Google Signals and in Google Analytics, you are looking at those demographics reports that show they estimate age, male, female, interests. That data is not sent into BigQuery. And the reason is because you would, and in BigQuery, you have individual level information, and that would be a little bit of a privacy question to be able to say, I know that this ID is a man and who's interested in cars, for example. So that data does not flow in. Also, data that you have from integrations doesn't flow in. So if you link Google Analytics to Google Ads, your Google Ads data won't flow directly in with Google Analytics. You can pull your Google Ads data into BigQuery and then write some SQL that joins them, but it's a little bit of an extra step. So those are the three challenges. Now, there are a lot of benefits to reporting from BigQuery. The first one is the one that saves a lot of our clients when they've accidentally pushed out some bad tags in the past. And that is, you can use it to recalculate metrics that were previously captured incorrectly. This won't work for every tagging problem you've had, but I have had an instance where a client incorrectly installed the user ID, and I was able to write a query and clean up the data so that it correctly showed what the bounce rate, what the users should be, that kind of thing. And there are plenty of other examples of data that you can correct. Another great example is if you change the name of something and you have an event that, or a parameter that they're not rolling up properly, or there's a capital letter, those kinds of things can be corrected in BigQuery. The second thing is you can analyze across scopes. So if you're pulling reports in the user interface, sometimes you want to look at an event and a session or a user scope metric at the same time. So this example here is what pages were viewed by visitors who came from Facebook. The source that you're looking for of Facebook describes your entire session, and pages is an event scoped metric. So combining those in the user interface causes weird bugs and you can't really do it well. You can do that in BigQuery. There are a couple of examples of bugs in the user interface. Brian just happened to catch one weird thing, which is that new and established users can sometimes be not set or null, and that just causes questions. So you can just write a query that cleans that up and makes that clear to people reading the reports. One really cool one, though, is you can also join your data with other sources. So if I've got an email tool sending out emails and I can see how many people received and opened an email, and then they clicked on a link in that email, and now I can also combine it with how many of them went on to convert on the website. You can do that kind of thing super easy when your data is in BigQuery. You can also bring in data from Google Ads, Meta, Bing, and you can do things like just yesterday, actually, I was calculating the cost of acquiring a customer by these different tools. You could probably come up with ways to do that without BigQuery, but it makes all your data sit in one place and it makes it really easy to work with. And then, of course, if you have a CRM system, BigQuery is huge. You could push data from Google Analytics into the CRM, like show me all of the pages that this lead in Salesforce has visited in the last 30 days. And you can also pull data out of the CRM. So I could create an audience based on people who have added something to the cart, and also they've got some qualify or some attribute on their CRM record. You can build dashboards in your BI tool. You might be thinking, well, yeah, but you can do that today with the API. True, but with the API, you have sampling, you have token quotas, you're subject to hyperlog. If you try and look too closely at your data, you'll have thresholding applied. All of those restrictions go away if you're using BigQuery. You can create segments. So imagine that you're one of these folks who's already using a BI tool like Looker Studio to create dashboards for your company. You've probably ran into the fact that you can't use a segment when you pull the data that way. And that's really frustrating. I think probably at some point in the future, Google will add those to the API. But you can just create your own segments in BigQuery and problem solved. Now, if you happen to be using a CDP, BigQuery becomes really powerful because you can take your identifiers for a user and you can just start creating attributes about people. So for a specific individual, how many times did they visit a product detail page? That could be an attribute that you then funnel into a CDP that you use to target them with emails. Maybe it has something that you can use to activate on your website so that this user sees a custom experience, anything like that. And then the last benefit is a broad category of you now can do all types of advanced analysis. Imagine that you have products on your site and you want to recommend what products a person might be interested in based on their Google Analytics data. Maybe they've viewed or they've certain products, they've purchased certain products in the past. You can do that. You can do propensity modeling. You can do cluster modeling to look for similar users. And one thing that I really love is doing forecasting and anomaly detection. So I can see when I have a spike in my data. Maybe something happened, a lot of people went to my website on a certain day and I get a notification in Slack. You couldn't do that just with Google Analytics, but with the data in BigQuery, It's all possible. So those are the benefits, and it's a lot if you're brand new. So getting started with BigQuery is something that can be a bit challenging, and we've pulled together a couple of learning resources that we want to share with everyone. And these three are specifically for beginners. So if you're a beginner, we put our recommendations into these three categories, which is sometimes you just want to go to a website and use an online resource that's really helpful. Sometimes you want to take a class that's pre-recorded, and sometimes it's nice to take a class that has an instructor that you can ask questions, share your screen, and have someone specifically help you. I'll start with the last one. We do have a course that is an instructor-led kind of beginner course that's coming at the end of this year, beginning of next year. It's not live now, but that will be coming soon. And we also have some other resources. Johan, do you want to just quickly describe these other online resources? Since you're pretty involved with a couple of them.
Yeah, so gf4bigquery.com is an online platform where you will find free and some premium content about querying the GA4 export. And also another one, not built by me, but by someone else, is GA4SQL.com, which is really powerful when you have a specific report in mind that you want to build. It will just give you a ready-to-go query as an output. Of course, we have the query GA4 data in Google BigQuery video course. It's on the Simmer platform, founded by Simo Ahava. Well, I'm the instructor there as well, and we're currently reworking that course to make it even more accessible for beginners.
Awesome. So if I'm just getting started with using my data in BigQuery, the kinds of things that you typically are going to do are say, normally I would pull a report in the user interface. So I'm going to try and recreate that in BigQuery. And I gave this example a moment ago of new versus established users. One of the things, though, that you'll notice is that whenever you pull those reports, the numbers will often be slightly different than what you see in the user interface. And the reason is because often time zone. So your data in BigQuery is stored at UTC, and Google Analytics might be showing a data. For me, I'm on the East Coast, United States, so in Eastern time. And so you need to convert the timestamp over to make sure you're looking at the same information. There's also some other little differences. So you might have in Google Analytics a reporting identity set to observed or blended, and or potentially modeled. And so there are differences there that you might want to account for. If you're to match the observed reporting identity, then that means you want to ignore any logged in users. But if somebody is logged in, then and you're using the observed, you want to be able to use that identifier. So there are little things that once you figure out the logic for, it's helpful to store that somewhere. So every time you pull a report, it always applies the same logic. And that is where you get into modeling. So this is the intermediate level, I would say, or maybe more advanced level, where you go not just from specific queries, but to actually building these models that are then totally running all this logic and prepared. So this is what the model looks like that we use at Dive Team. We pull in your staging events, we run an identity graph, and this is where you tell it if you want to use the user ID or not. We then have an intermediate table where all of those events are stitched to the user that you want to use. Then we need to go through session attribution and try and match the last click session reporting you have in Google Analytics. We also build out user attributes and session attributes, and then we create segments and we join everything together. And every day when your new data comes in, you need to run it through this model just to prepare it for your reporting. Now, we have resources to help with this as well. When you do model orchestration, usually you're talking about dbt or a tool built into BigQuery called Dataform. There are two resources that really help people get started with this. One is coming soon. It's GA4 Dataform, which is also a project of Johann's that will help you just launch a model right out of the gate without any setup. You don't really need to be an expert in what's going on. And then we do have an instructor-led course as well. So this is the course, we call it Prep Google Analytics Data for Reporting in BigQuery. We are enrolling for the next round, which starts September 9th, and the QR code there will take you directly to the sign-up page. We actually have a partnership with the Test and Learn community. So this course, you sign up for it there. And the way it works is we will actually take the model that I just showed and we deploy that for everyone over the course of 8 sessions. So we will help you set it up. We'll be on a screen share where you can ask questions. You'll be with a group of other people who are going through it with you. We have a Slack channel where you can ask each other for help. You can work through issues with the instructor. And at the end of 8 weeks, you'll have a full data model built and ready for your reporting. So if you're interested in going to that level, hopefully some of you will sign up for the class. And we also, of course, lead the same training for teams that you can schedule anytime. It doesn't have to start September 9th. So we did that in 28 minutes. That concludes everything that we wanted to show you about reporting from BigQuery. And I hope that you can really see the value, that there's a ton of benefit if you can get it set up the right way to saying goodbye to the GA4 user interface and just doing all of your data analysis, reporting, visualizations right in the raw data in BigQuery.